It was just a movie. Just a made-up, scripted, filmed story, and right? But what if I told you that for some people, The Grudge didn't end when the credits rolled? That after pressing play, what was on screen faded away. Today, you'll hear 4 real stories experienced by ordinary people that guarantee something came out of the screen. Documented experiences, recorded audio, images no one could explain, and a warning: if you hear this sound during the video, you better not look back. First report. She was 16. Her name was Haley Monroe, a quiet girl from a quiet town in Nebraska. She didn't party, she didn't sneak out, and she didn't believe in ghosts. Her idea of rebellion? Staying up late to watch horror movies her parents told her not to. That was exactly what she did one Friday night in October. Her parents were out of town. Her little brother was sleeping. The house was silent. She dimmed the lights, opened a bag of popcorn, and hit play on a movie she'd been curious about for months: The Grudge. At first, it was just like any other horror film. Creepy sounds, dark hallways, jump scares. But something about The Grudge hit different. Maybe it was the way the house in the movie felt too familiar, or how the character Kayako moved. Slow, distorted, broken. Haley admitted to herself she was scared, but it was a fun kind of scared. That is, until halfway through the film, when she heard a loud thump above her head. She paused the movie. Listened. Silence. She shrugged it off as the house settling and pressed play. A few minutes later, another sound. This time it wasn't a thump. It was a dragging noise. Long, dry, coming from the ceiling, the attic. Haley muted the TV. The sound stopped. She stood up, walked slowly into the hallway and looked up at the ceiling panel where the attic entrance sat. Nothing, no movement, no sound. But her heart was racing. She returned to the living room but didn't restart the movie. Instead, she double-locked the door and turned on every light in the house. That night, she couldn't sleep. Around 3:27 a.m., she woke up from what felt like a nightmare, but she couldn't remember the dream. What she did remember was that she felt watched. Not by someone outside, not by a presence in the room, but by something above her. She stared at the ceiling for hours, listening. Nothing. The next morning, she laughed it off. Classic horror movie hangover. She made coffee, texted her friends about the movie, and didn't mention the sounds. But over the next few nights, they returned, always around 3 a.m., always faint, scraping, then silence, then one night, footsteps, slow, padded, deliberate, like bare feet moving across insulation. She told her parents once they got back. Her dad went up to the attic and checked. Nothing was there, no animals, no damage, no intruders. Everything was clean. Still, the sounds didn't stop. That's when Haley decided to do something she hadn't done before: record the noise. She set her phone to record at bedtime and placed it on the nightstand. The next morning, she listened. The first 4 hours were normal. Silence. Then, at 3:22 a.m., the sound began. But it wasn't footsteps. It was a breathing, slow, wheezy, and followed by a low, guttural moan, the exact same one from The Grudge. It wasn't from the film. She had turned it off days ago. This was real. It wasn't on TV. It was inside the house. Terrified, Haley sent the recording to her best friend. Her friend played it on speaker, and her phone crashed. Later that day, her friend got a nosebleed at school and had to be sent home. Haley, now fully convinced something was wrong, called her youth pastor. He listened, told her it was just fear, and suggested she delete the recording. But she didn't. She kept it, and she uploaded it to a private YouTube channel under an anonymous name. She titled it, "I Think the Movie Did Something to My House." Within a week, the video had 400 views, Then it disappeared. Not because she deleted it, but because YouTube took it down for violating community guidelines. She never found out which ones. When she tried to re-upload the file, the audio was corrupted. The breathing was gone, replaced by static. And in the middle of that static, a phrase repeated in a low whisper, "Don't record the house." Haley started sleeping with her lights on. Her brother, who had no idea what was happening, began sleepwalking. He was found twice at the bottom of the attic steps, staring upward. When asked, he didn't remember getting out of bed. One night, Haley followed the sound of creaking wood and found the attic panel slightly ajar. No one had opened it. Her parents were out. Her brother was asleep. She shut it, locked it, and left a chair underneath to prevent it from being opened again. But the next morning, the chair had been moved. No prints, no sign of disturbance, just silence. For weeks, the house remained heavy with unease. Then came the final night. The night Haley decided to leave. She recorded again, this time with 2 phones. One caught nothing, the other, placed in her closet facing the ceiling vent, captured something different. Not just breathing, but movement. A pale hand, misshapen female, gripping the edge of the vent for one frame. And a whisper, clearer than ever, "I see you." She never stayed in that house again. She moved in with her aunt in Colorado. She refused to bring any of her electronics with her, even her phone. She cut all contact with social media. And she never watched a horror film again. Her parents sold the house 8 months later after reporting faulty wiring and paranormal disturbance to the insurance company. None of that mattered to Haley. Because every now and then, just before falling asleep, she said she'd still hear it. That slow, ragged breath. And then that sound. That iconic, twisted, broken moan that wasn't supposed to exist off-screen. And the attic, always in her dreams, always waiting at the top of the stairs. But Haley's story was just the beginning. Because for some, the terror doesn't crawl from the attic. It waits beside your bed, just long enough for you to close your eyes. That's what happened to James, a man whose nightmares didn't start until he pressed play. And what he captured while unable to move may be the most disturbing evidence ever recorded after watching The Grudge. Second report. His name was James Weaver, 32 years old. Former paramedic living alone in a 1-bedroom apartment just outside of Portland, Oregon. He'd seen things most people couldn't imagine. Accidents, trauma, death. The kind of experiences that tend to harden someone, make them skeptical of anything supernatural. Horror movies, child's play. That's what he told himself. Until a slow weekend led him to revisit an old classic he hadn't seen in years. The Grudge. He watched it. Late, around 1:45 a.m., with the lights off, half a pizza in his lap, and his dog Max snoring at his feet. For the first hour, nothing out of the ordinary. But somewhere near the end of the film, Max woke up and began to growl at nothing. James paused the movie, looked around. Silence. Max stared at the corner of the room, stiff, growling low and steady. Then, out of nowhere, he let out a high-pitched whine and ran to the bedroom. James laughed nervously, shrugged it off, and kept watching. He didn't sleep that night. Not because of fear, but because something felt off. His chest was tight. The air felt heavy. And when he finally drifted off just before sunrise, he woke again within minutes, completely paralyzed. He'd had sleep paralysis once before, years ago. He knew the feeling, wide awake, totally alert, but unable to move. The weight pressing down on him, the sensation of something watching. But this was different. This time, he could hear something, not in the room, inside his head. A static sound like a detuned radio, hissing, popping. Then, a breath, not his, slow, wet, human. It got louder with each second, and then he heard it. A clicking sound, just like in the film. That deep, croaking noise that always came before she appeared. James wanted to scream but couldn't. His jaw wouldn't move, his body was frozen, his vision blurred. Then, at the corner of his bed, something shifted. A shadow. He couldn't see clearly, but he could feel it, watching, waiting. Inches from his feet. When his body finally broke free, 37 seconds later, he sat up gasping for air. The room was empty. Max was under the bed, trembling. He didn't sleep the next night, or the one after, but eventually exhaustion won. And when it did, the paralysis returned. This time he decided to fight back, not physically but with proof. James installed a night vision camera in his bedroom, motion activated, silent. He left it recording every night for a week. On the third night, something triggered the sensor at 3:11 a.m. The clip showed James asleep. Then his body stiffens. Seconds later, the corner of the blanket lifts slightly. Not enough to reveal anything, but enough to suggest something was pulling it. He showed the footage to a friend from his old EMT crew. The friend didn't react with disbelief. Instead, he asked a strange question. "Did you hear the sound yet?" Confused, James pressed for more. The friend said he had a cousin who experienced something similar after watching The Grudge years ago. That the cousin kept hearing a sound, a whisper, right before a presence arrived, but it only happened when the lights were off. James didn't believe it until it happened again. This time, he heard a whisper. It came from right beside his ear, as if someone was crouching low, inches from his face. He described it as both female and broken, like someone trying to speak through shattered vocal cords. It said 3 words, "Look behind you." He couldn't move, couldn't turn his head. All he could do was cry. The next day, he removed the camera and burned sage throughout the apartment. A few days passed with no incidents, but then Max disappeared. No sign of forced entry, no open doors, no barking, just gone. James searched everywhere, filed reports, checked shelters. Nothing. 3 nights later, at exactly 3:14 a.m., he heard a bark. One single bark. From inside the apartment, he ran to the living room. Empty. But the TV was on, playing a static-filled screen. In the middle of the static, an image flickered. A face, pale, long black hair, and the eyes, black pits, staring directly at the camera. He unplugged the TV, left the apartment that night and never returned. He tried to rebuild his life, moved states, changed jobs, adopted a new dog. But the paralysis followed him. Always the same time, always the same breath, always the same sound. He spoke to a sleep specialist, went through dozens of tests, no abnormalities, until one night, the doctor allowed him to record during a sleep paralysis episode using EEG and video. What they found changed everything. At 3:09 a.m., James froze, but the brain scan showed activity in 2 separate zones, one normal, one unexplainable, as if another presence had entered the experience. The video showed James whispering something, barely audible. They isolated the audio, cleaned it up. He was saying, "She's under the bed." The doctors never found a medical explanation. James stopped, responding to calls shortly after that. His final message to his EMT friend was a photo, a blurry image of a mirror with something standing behind him, smiling. The caption read, "Still think it's just a movie?" And while James captured something in the real world, our next story comes from someone who tried to document it online. A horror YouTuber who thought reacting to The Grudge live would be good content, but the stream that followed was his last appearance on the internet. Ever. Third report. It was a quiet evening in a small town in Oregon when Daniel Mercer decided to wind down after work by watching a horror movie. Nothing unusual, just his favorite way to relax. But this time, instead of re-watching something familiar, he decided to check out a fan-uploaded live stream on a niche horror subreddit. The post had no title, just a single cryptic sentence. "She only shows herself when it's live." Intrigued, he clicked. The screen flickered, showing a dimly lit room. No host. No dialogue. Just a looping feed of what looked like a narrow hallway in an old house. Static crept in and out like waves. Occasionally, something would shift in the shadows, almost imperceptibly. Daniel leaned in, expecting a cheap jump scare or an art project, but 20 minutes passed. Nothing. He was about to close the tab when the chat exploded. One user typed, "Did anyone else see her at the edge of the mirror?" Another replied, "She's closer now. Look by the stairs." Daniel squinted. Sure enough, there was something. A shape, tall, pale, slightly distorted, like an image that hadn't fully loaded. But as he focused, the figure flickered and disappeared. The stream stuttered, buffering. When it resumed, the hallway was empty again. A message appeared across the screen. "Connection lost. Reconnecting." Daniel felt a chill. It wasn't the stream that froze this time. It was his monitor, all inputs locked. Then his speakers hissed, a low, wet static, followed by a sound like breathing, slow, close. He turned around, nothing there. But when he looked back at the screen, the live stream was back. Only now the hallway was gone, replaced with a view of his bedroom, his desk, his chair, his reflection. Daniel yanked the power cord. Darkness. Total silence. He stood in the middle of his room, trying to calm his breath. He hadn't enabled any webcam access, had no camera facing him. And yet that image, that exact angle, was what he'd just seen. He stayed at a friend's place that night, but curiosity and fear pushed him to dig deeper. Over the next few days, he searched the subreddit again. The post was gone, but others had started to appear. Posts with screenshots, grainy footage, people claiming that after watching the stream, they started seeing glitches in real life, reflections that didn't match, rooms that flickered briefly like buffering video, and one recurring phrase, "She's watching the watchers." One post in particular stood out. It was from a user who went by Stream Zero. He claimed to be the original uploader, and the warnings were real. The hallway, he said, belonged to a condemned house in Kyoto, a place tied to a number of disappearances in the late 1990s. Locals said it was cursed, but more than that it was a place where stories looped. Not just events, emotions, fear, despair. A woman had died there under tragic and violent circumstances, and her presence didn't just linger. It spread like a virus through analog media, VHS tapes, then DVDs, now live streams. Each time someone watches, they become a node, a relay point. She moves through the signal, through the screen. Daniel tried contacting Stream Zero, but the account had vanished, deleted, no trace. And worse, he began experiencing things he couldn't explain. His laptop turned on by itself at night, always to a paused video player. One time it played on its own, no file listed, just a countdown. At 0, the screen went black and the audio kicked in. A sharp gasp, like someone had been holding their breath, and finally exhaled. That same night, Daniel dreamt he was trapped in a hallway, narrow, flickering. At the far end, a figure stood still. No face, just long, stringy hair. In the dream, he reached out and woke up with his hand against the mirror in his room. The same handprint stayed there for days, no matter how many times he cleaned it. A week later, Daniel received a flash drive in the mail. No return address. Just a sticky note. Don't plug this in, burn it. He hesitated, then plugged it in. The drive contained one file. Grudge Stream Reconnect MP4. It wouldn't open, but when he scanned it, it wasn't a video file. It was an executable. He shut the computer down, but not before the file opened on its own. The same hallway, same angle, but this time she was right there, in the center, still, staring directly at the screen. Daniel's case is not isolated. Reports of viewers experiencing digital hauntings are growing. Files that won't delete. Footage that shows moments not yet lived. Video calls with frozen frames that blink. The entity, if that's what it is, seems to have adapted. No longer tied to physical media. It now exists in latency, bandwidth, anything with a signal. And she no longer waits to be watched. She watches back. Perhaps most disturbing is what Daniel discovered last, a folder buried deep in his temp files. Inside were dozens of screenshots, not of him, but of others. Strangers, all seemingly midstream, terrified, some with mouths open as if screaming, some looking over their shoulders. And in the corner of every image, her, closer, clearer, smiling. Then Daniel vanished. His last post was a single sentence. "If your stream freezes, don't move." His apartment was found empty, no signs of forced entry, only his chair, still warm, and his laptop screen, cracked from the inside. Now, if you think this couldn't happen to you, that the stories are just fiction, remember this. Every view, every click, strengthens the signal. Every second you watch, you're opening the door a little wider. And if your screen flickers, even once, it may already be too late. Fourth report. It was a retired music producer named Elena Wexler who brought the case to public light, not through a horror blog, not in a forum post, but through an official report to a now-defunct digital preservation project. Her account wasn't centered on a video, but on a soundtrack, one she was hired to digitize for archival purposes. The file was labeled only as Session KGEO for WAV, and was found inside a forgotten hard drive recovered from a flooded storage unit in Tokyo. According to the metadata, the session was recorded in 2003. The same year, the Grudge film franchise exploded in Japan. But this wasn't part of the official score. There was no composer credited, no studio logs. Just a single note written in Japanese, translating to, "Do not isolate the voice." Elena's job was simple: convert, catalog, and upload. But when she played the file for the first time, something went wrong. The waveform on her screen looked strange. Erratic spikes where no audio should exist. She heard the faint sounds of a woman breathing, then gasping, then sobbing quietly in the distance. A growing, scratchy noise followed. Not feedback, not static, but like something crawling inside the wiring itself. She assumed it was corrupt, maybe moisture damage. But when she tried to close the file, her software froze, and the breathing kept playing. She restarted her system. It booted up playing the same sound. No apps open. The audio embedded into the system somehow. Even after muting all output channels, Elena could still hear it. Faint, like it was coming from inside her headphones even when unplugged. A week later, her recording booth door slammed shut on its own. Twice. That's when she checked the file again, using a spectral analyzer. What she saw didn't make sense. Buried in the frequencies, almost subliminal, was a voice, whispering in Japanese. She contacted a translator who refused to continue listening after 1 minute. His face turned pale, and all he said was, "It's asking who's watching and who's next." Disturbed, Elena attempted to delete the file. It wouldn't go. Not with conventional methods, not with data wipes. Even formatting the drive left the file untouched. And then came the video. Late one night, while checking her system logs, she found an auto-generated screen recording. She had no software capable of that. In the video, she's seen sitting still at her desk, wearing headphones. But the timeline shows it was recorded during a time she swore she was asleep, and worse, she never looked up once, just sat, unmoving, for 2 full hours. A few days later, she began receiving emails from unknown addresses. Some were empty, others contained broken sentences in multiple languages. One line repeated in several, "Don't isolate the voice." She dug deeper into the history of the hard drive. It originally belonged to a Japanese university's sound design program, which had partnered briefly with a horror film studio. Records indicated several students worked on audio tests for a concept film never released. Internal reports mentioned multiple dropouts from the program, citing auditory hallucinations. One student, a woman named Rika Yamano, had vanished in early 2004. Her last message to her professor read, "She's in the mix now. Please don't listen again." Elena didn't stop. She uploaded the file to a secure server and shared it with a select group of researchers. Within 72 hours, 2 reported insomnia. One claimed he began hearing knocking sounds in his home's ventilation system. Another described hearing a voice whispering through his smart speaker when it wasn't powered. Then, the server went down. The file had spread, not by sharing, but seemingly by duplication. One audio engineer claimed his DAW generated a replica waveform while working on an unrelated project. The project rendered overnight with the same voice embedded. It became clear the audio wasn't just cursed, it was adaptive. Not only did it carry something unsettling, it actively resisted deletion. It copied itself, reformatted itself, and found hosts, much like a digital parasite. Elena theorized that what they were dealing with wasn't just a haunted sound, but a phenomenon. A frequency range that served as a gateway, a channel. That theory gained terrifying support when a French acoustician attempted to isolate the frequencies containing the voice. He used analog equipment to filter the range into a tape reel. He reported screaming in his studio the night of the test. His assistant, found the next morning, claimed she saw a woman in white standing behind him in the booth, even though surveillance showed no one else was present. The reel was blank. Elena began to understand the truth. This was more than audio. It was an echo, a spiritual residue preserved not in haunted houses, but in data, in bits and bytes. A kind of digital haunting not bound by geography or belief, only by attention. You hear her. She finds you. And the implications were chilling. How many people had accidentally heard fragments of this sound in film backgrounds, ambient recordings, even lo-fi YouTube videos? How many content creators had unknowingly layered it into their edits, mistaking it for ambience or atmospheric tension? Every listen, a doorway cracked. Every remaster, another chance for her to slip through. Elena's last communication came through a private live stream, attended by just 3 researchers. She was visibly sleep-deprived. Her eyes never blinked, and she wore headphones the entire time. She said the file had changed, that it no longer required a player to transmit, that she could hear it now in silence. Her final words were, "There's no static anymore, only her breathing." The stream cut out. Elena was never seen again. The organization she worked with quietly erased all references to the file, but copies exist, on forgotten USB drives, in unlisted Google Drive folders, and some claim to have heard parts of it on TikTok filters, warped, slowed, but still present, still waiting. So if you ever stumble on an unexplained audio file online, especially one without a title, without credits, and especially if it comes with no explanation, don't listen. Don't isolate the voice. Don't replay it backwards. And if late at night your room goes silent, and you hear slow, labored breathing from the corner where your speakers used to be, remember this chapter. You weren't meant to hear her, but now she's heard you.